When families gather for the holidays, fun activities are often planned to create lasting memories together. The Jones family decided to go caving at Nutty Putty Cave, an adventure they thought would be exciting and memorable. But they had no idea of the devastating loss their family would soon suffer. This is the tragic story behind the broken omen of the Nutty Putty Cave tragedy. John Jones was ready for some family fun when they decided to explore Nutty Putty Cave in the Utah desert near Salt Lake City. He had never been to this particular cave before, but he and his brother Josh had spent much of their youth caving in various Utah caves. John considered himself an experienced caver, though his explorations had slowed in recent years. He had gotten married, started a family, and was currently a medical student at the University of Virginia, a busy schedule that left little time for cave adventures. During Thanksgiving break, he returned home to relax with family for the holiday. They planned a day of hiking and exploring at Nutty Putty, which was generally considered a beginner-friendly cave by most standards. The main areas of the cave were interesting for everyone. There was the maze room, where openings and tunnels wound around large boulders. There was also a steeply sloped area known as the Slide, which dropped at a 45-degree angle and had a rope to help visitors descend safely. The cave system was well mapped in most traversable areas, but it also featured more challenging passages like the birth canal and the aorta crawl. These sections were tight and difficult to pass through, typically attempted only by more experienced cavers. Even so, many people still found themselves stuck in these narrow squeezes. Nutty Putty had recently reopened to the public after being closed for several years due to frequent incidents of people getting stuck. While some could manage the tight spots, others discovered that their shoulders or hips simply wouldn't fit, no matter how hard they tried to pull themselves through. Once wedged in, they were completely stuck, requiring extensive assistance to slowly inch back out. Because of these past rescues, a new permit-style entry system was introduced, requiring each group to include at least 2 experienced cavers. Josh had obtained such a permit for their group, planning the trip for Tuesday, November 24th, 2009, the day before Thanksgiving. John's pregnant wife, Emily, stayed home with their 1-year-old daughter, Lizzie, to enjoy a more relaxed evening with the in-laws. Their group of 11, made up of family and friends, began exploring the main open sections of the cave. Eventually, John and his brother Josh took 2 friends with them to search for more challenging tunnels. They had heard stories about the birth canal and checked the map to locate it. It was known to be a long, tight passage with a particularly narrow squeeze near the end. If you could just get past the narrowest part of the passage, there was said to be a small room at the end, a place where you could stand up and turn around. John and Josh knew that the birth canal would be tight and potentially panic-inducing, even for experienced cavers. They spread out to try to locate the tunnel. John and Josh took the left passage, moving through a small tunnel about 15 feet long. It undulated up and down in several places. Over the next 10 feet, there were rock outcroppings and tight squeezes that required a caver to twist their body into different positions, first getting the shoulders through, then the hips, and finally angling the legs so they bent in the right direction. This wasn't a matter of simply forcing your way through a tight hole. This section was known as the corkscrew, because only the smallest and most flexible cavers had managed to pass through it, using every bit of skill to slowly maneuver through the panic-inducing contortions. After the corkscrew area, the passage angled upward for another 5 feet or so, then turned downward over a rock ledge with a sharp 90-degree bend to the left. Up until now, cavers had used this small space after the corkscrew to turn back if needed and head through the difficult section again. 5 years earlier, a 16-year-old boy named Brock Clark had become stuck in this very corkscrew section. He was only 5 feet 7 inches tall and weighed 140 pounds, but he got wedged in while trying to turn around. It took rescuers 14 hours to free him. John was now in the exact spot where Brock had been stuck, attempting to turn around. Since John was 6 feet tall and weighed 200 pounds, he clearly understood that turning around in this tight part of the tunnel was not an option. He was in a space only 12 inches high, with no lateral room to curl up and twist his body. Instead, he pushed forward toward the ledge area and squeezed over the top of it. It was a tight spot, but he thought he could see it open up below. He sucked in his stomach and pressed himself through, the squeeze pulling forward on the rocks ahead of him. He was now moving headfirst in a downward angle, but he believed there was a space ahead where he could turn around. John didn't realize it at the time, but no one else had ever crossed over this ledge before. He was entering completely uncharted territory. Despite being in an extremely tight and uncomfortable position, John kept his cool. He remained confident that there would be an opening ahead. All along, he assumed he was still somewhere within the birth canal, a section where many cavers had felt trapped, but eventually made it through safely. As he passed through a tight zone, he suddenly began sliding downward. He was nearly doing a handstand, trying to hold his body up and figure out how to push backward. He still couldn't turn around, and now he was upside down. Gravity was pulling his 200-pound body against the fading strength of his arms. He yelled out to his brother Josh and told him not to follow, to go back instead. They discussed his options and decided that moving forward to try to turn around was the best idea. At this point, John was collapsing onto his shoulders and head and needed to make a move to escape this vertical position. His headlamp gave him a glimpse of a hole in the floor ahead, which might lead to a larger space. He felt a little more hopeful, thinking they'd soon be laughing about this misadventure over Thanksgiving dinner. He made a slight turn and headed toward the hole. Exactly how he got himself into that tunnel remains unknown. It's believed that he may have slipped and hit his head. John became wedged in the tight space. Another possibility was that he looked into the hole but misjudged what he saw, thinking it was an opening, not simply a dead end. Either way, John had ended up inside a small cavity at the bottom of the tunnel, a space that was impossibly narrow, just 18 inches by 10 inches, not much bigger than the screen of a laptop computer. John found himself wedged nearly completely upside down at a 70-degree angle. He spent some time trying to push himself back upward out of the hole, but it was exhausting. His arms were pinned in useless positions, one folded under his chest, the other trapped against a rock by his side. He strained against the walls and quickly realized that all his effort wouldn't budge him back up into the shallow tunnel above. His calves and feet were still free, up in the passage, but his legs were now wedged into the smallest part of the hole, only 8 inches wide. He started yelling for Josh again. His brother knew John had been trying to turn around, so hearing his voice wasn't a good sign. Josh made his way back into the tight space and navigated through the corkscrew path, this time going feet first. He continued forward until he reached the ledge. He finally came upon an alarming sight. He could see the end of his brother's leg sticking out of the rock as if it had swallowed him whole. Josh inched forward until his feet could press against one of John's legs. He tried to grip and pull while John pushed from his end. After several futile attempts, both brothers were exhausted and frustrated. Josh could see that this was very serious. They would need professional help to get John out. They agreed that Josh should go get help, and John should try to stay calm and relaxed while he waited. One of the other family friends went into the area to speak to John and let him know he wasn't alone. For several hours, John remained trapped, upside down, focused mostly on the simple yet difficult task of breathing. The tight squeeze compressed his chest, allowing only shallow breaths. All of his efforts to move upward had actually settled him deeper into the crack. As time passed, gravity continued to pull him downward, tightening the tunnel's grip on his exhausted body. When help finally arrived, the first cave rescuer on the scene was Susie Mata. She reached John at around 12:30 in the morning, 3 hours after he had become trapped. Susie was only 5 feet 3 inches tall, which made moving through the corkscrew area much easier for her. Ropes were tied to her ankles as a precaution in case she got stuck, too. She checked on John and let him know they were going to get him out. He must have felt a wave of relief knowing that professional help had arrived. Soon, he would be free from this trap. Susie tied webbing straps around his legs and fed the rope back to the pit where the tunnel began. Several attempts were made to pull on the ropes and use leverage to lift John up and out of the fissure. However, there was too much friction on the ropes to make any effective progress. John was still pinned, and without the use of his arms to assist, movement was extremely limited. After trying several approaches and considering more aggressive options, the team decided to set up a pulley system to help lift John out. A pulley had successfully freed Brock Clark 5 years earlier. Even though they now had a plan, this was not an easy location to work in. Each piece of equipment had to be carried in from the entrance, a journey that took nearly an hour to reach the other side of the corkscrew. The tunnel was extremely tight, and only smaller power tools could be brought in. And out, only one person could be in the tunnel at a time, and they would need to be small or wiry to effectively move through the passage. It was just not an ideal situation. Each pulley took an extraordinary amount of time to install. During this time, cavers were trying to talk with John, console him, and share stories to keep him calm and engaged. He was a devout Mormon and spent time praying and singing to seek solace in this surreal situation. John had spent the night upside down and was now showing signs of the body's physical limits when held in that position for too long. The human body is not designed to remain inverted for extended periods. The entire circulatory system relies on pulses of pressure from the heart to move blood forward, using valves and fibrous vessels to prevent backflow. This one-way system balances pressure, gravity, and oxygen delivery to tissues, while also removing toxins through the kidneys. John's body had been fighting gravity for over 12 hours. His brain was not built to withstand this kind of fluid pressure. Fluids were building up in his lungs, and toxins were starting to accumulate due to poor circulation. His organs were pressing against his lungs, making each breath an exhausting effort for muscles not meant for such work. His breathing was slowing, and he was completely drained from the effort. Throughout the night, he had gone from being calm and lucid to thrashing helplessly and even hallucinating. It was excruciating for the rescuers to watch. They were helpless, exhausted, and felt trapped themselves. The air in the cave was warm and damp. It took real effort to stay calm and breathe steadily when restricted, unable to move or even breathe properly. But the rescuers knew they could eventually leave if needed. John didn't have that luxury. He couldn't expand his chest fully to breathe, and the oxygen level around him was slowly decreasing. During this time, a wired telecom system was brought down to where John was stuck. His wife, Emily, spoke with him, encouraging him to hang on and remain faithful. John assured her he would be out with her soon. It wasn't until 4 p.m. that day that the team finally got the pulleys in place to attempt to move him. Ryan Shurtz was inside the tunnel when the system was ready. John's body had settled deeper into the narrow part of the opening, so Ryan had to push his legs over as the team pulled from outside. Each heave moved him inch by inch upward. By this point, John's legs were in excruciating pain. A rope had been tied around them for hours as rescuers tried various methods to free him. They were completely blue and showed no discernible pulse. Each tug caused John to cry out in pain, begging them to stop. His nerves were extremely sensitive. They paused to give him a moment to gather himself, then tried again. It seemed to be working. John was finally being pulled up out of the hole. He was raised enough for Ryan to look down and make actual eye contact with him. They passed down a tube so John could drink some Gatorade. This effort was extremely slow and exhausting for everyone involved. Ryan was squeezed into a tunnel only 12 inches high, with his head near John's legs, as they worked him slowly out of the tight 10-inch fissure. Although they were making progress lifting him up, they were no closer to getting him out. His legs kept hitting the low ceiling above, and twisting them into the passage was impossible. John had no control over his legs after being upside down for 19 hours without the ability to bend his knees delicately to the side. At this point, they were strongly considering breaking his legs to get him back into the passage because time was running out. Then, in a sudden moment of blinding pain, Ryan blacked out. When he came to, he was bleeding heavily and confused. The rope holding the pulley to a natural arch section in the cave had snapped, whipping the carabiner and pulley directly into Ryan's face. He suffered facial injuries, damage to his lip and tongue, and a concussion. He had to get out of there quickly. John was right back where he started, completely wedged in the tunnel, with circulation cut off to his arms and his legs completely numb. He was unable to help free himself in any way. This moment marked the final turning point in John Jones' ordeal. After Ryan was checked out in the pit and then rushed to the hospital, his father, Dave, took his place in the passage with John. It took another hour to re-establish the pulley lines, and Dave tried to tie a rope around John's body but couldn't get it past his wedged torso. So, for all the time Dave was with John, John was unresponsive. This entire operation required John's cooperation to be effective. There was simply no way to lift his 6-foot-tall, 200-pound frame without him pushing and trying to leverage himself somehow. In Dave's attempt to secure John, he got stuck himself for about 15 minutes. Their desperate efforts to save John had put both his son and himself in danger, a devastating reality. Once Dave had pushed himself back into the 12-inch tunnel, he was exhausted and had to leave. Brandon Coles took his place and brought in the telecom system so John's family could speak with him. His wife, Emily, expressed her love and told him to take a break and rest after all his effort. She still truly believed he would be coming out. But Brandon could see what she could not. John was no longer responsive. No signs of life could be heard. Over the previous several hours, Ryan had reported gurgling breaths, which now gave way to silence. The rescue team gathered in the pit area inside the cave and discussed the grim situation. It was determined that a medical professional would need to confirm whether John had actually passed away. A paramedic was sent into the tight section to confirm what was already suspected. At 11:56 a.m. on Wednesday, November 25th, John Jones was pronounced dead. The rescue teams had worked non-stop for 24 hours straight, trying to free John, but it was simply not possible. In his upside-down position, time had run out. John survived an extraordinary 27 hours in an inverted position, 3 times longer than what was predicted as possible. The 6 rescue personnel who actually reached John in that rocky prison were truly heroic. They willfully placed themselves in a portion of the cave that was unmapped with many known risks. They remained selfless, calm, and never gave up on a seemingly impossible mission. After determining that recovering the body was not feasible, John was left to rest eternally in the Ed's Push section of Nutty Putty Cave. The entire cave system was sealed off with concrete, never to be explored again. A plaque was placed at the entrance to commemorate the life of John Jones.